I chose to use my Weebly that I made in one of my TE classes as an MSU student for my HDFS 421 portfolio. Over in the top right corner, you can see the tab that says HDFS 421, and I actually decided to use all of my labs in their own tab because I felt that even though I didn't specifically talk about each lab as evidence, I felt that all of them had different concepts for the objectives, and I referenced them in all of my objectives, even if they weren't as specific as other pieces of evidence that I included. So they have a separate tab. And then I have all of my objectives over here in this tab with the conclusion. On the main page, I have, so if you click on HDFS 421, it comes to this page with my introduction, and basically in my introduction I talk about how important this class showed me that assessments are to the child care provider and education field. I felt like when I first started this class, I knew that assessments were a part of teaching, but being somebody who doesn't do well taking assessments, I didn't know how much of an impact it actually can have on a teacher with their students. And I also learned that um, assessments doesn't necessarily mean a long, huge test with multiple questions and specific answers. So for my objective one, which is the one that I'm going to be talking about, it is understand assessments as a construct, including its own terminology, structures, applications, and interpretations. Basically, what I talked about in my objective one is how much we learned about in our class about the basics of assessments and the different terms that come with assessments, and how important it is that if you don't know these basic skills at the beginning, then there's no way that you can learn about all of the other types of assessments and things that you can do with the assessments, which is what we did in later labs, if you don't know the basic foundation. So we talked a lot about the different moving parts to an assessment and how they all fit together towards an overall goal. We learned that assessments have to be authentic, and how most assessments done specifically in like for example, like in the CDL at MSU, it's based off of observation. So the best kind of assessments are through observation, and that is also one way that assessments can be authentic because you are not disrupting a child's daily routine. We learned things or words like screening, assessing, evaluation. I talked about how screening refers to different kinds of instruments used. Um, Assessing refers to the process of gathering information, and evaluation is like evaluating children to see if they have any developmental delays, or monitoring their progress towards what we could use assessments for. Um, Specifically in this class, we learned about how to interpret assessments as well, and how important it is to know um, some forms of statistics in um, analyzing results for assessments, because if you can give an assessment, that's great, but if you don't know what to do with the information, then you're not able to make learning objectives and goals for your children in the classroom. Um, so some of the other specific, what's the word I want, specific terminology that we used and learned in class were like formal and informal assessments, qualitative and quantitative, validity and reliability, and I think there's one more. Oh, like formative and summative assessments as well. So, like I said at the beginning, I really think that all of our labs throughout the entire semester really build on each other. At first, we start off with observing, and then we kind of go into different kinds of assessments, like or different kinds of assessments, like running records and anecdotal notes. And then our later labs go into more of the statistical mathematics, where we're analyzing like our data, and we're writing recommendations about what we could do. So I really think that all of our labs are pieces of evidence for every single objective that I chose. But specifically for this objective, I picked um, I picked the lab that is called Scoring and Interpreting T-Scores and Percentiles, which I did load down here at the bottom. And then my second piece of evidence is the interview that I did with Miss Diaz in the CDL at MSU. She's the infant room classroom teacher. So for Lab 5, I felt that this lab really showed my knowledge about terminology because we did the most math in this lab and we had to analyze and explain what the math meant from the scoring sheet and explain recommendations for the child. I received a 9.25 out of 10 on this assignment, which I believe shows that I am successfully able to observe children, score data, look at T-scores and analyze data, and then also infused with this lab, I used mode, median, and the mean to interpret data and organize the scores. So this was really like math related lab that I thought showed like the most improvement for myself in this class because I am not very good at math, but I felt that with the resources that we were given and by observing children and working in partners with and groups with these labs, I was able to work step by step and figure out what all this stuff meant, and then I was able to come up with objectives and learning goals for the children in the class. And then the second piece of evidence that I have is my interview. And overall, I just thought the interview was a really great way to learn more about the education field. So I'm really glad that it was one of the assignments in class. Specifically with Ms. Diaz, she was super energetic and positive about um, working with children and about assessments, especially too, which I think is important because sometimes teachers are not always, they do not always feel that way about assessments. Um, so during the interview, I was able to learn the process of assessment. She went in thoroughly and described the different kinds of assessments that they specifically use at the CDL. And they do the most through observation with anecdotal notes, and then they go into an online resource and plug in the things that they see. So this kind of puts children at a base for like where they are at developmentally. And then they take this and they use it to set up learning objectives. So maybe a child isn't, if they are not observing a child doing certain things, then they're going to set up more opportunities for this child to see if they're able to complete or not complete the milestone. And then um, it also opened my eyes to realize how time consuming this is. Miss Diaz explained to me that these assessments are the foundation of her class because she's able to set the objectives for the children after she observes. And she explained to me how family is so important in this process because she establishes a relationship with children and their families at the beginning, to be able to trust each other so that later when she has to communicate these kinds of results, whether it may be positive or negative, that there's a trusting, caring foundation set at the beginning so that communication is well done and trying his best to not hurt anybody's feelings and really show that she's there as the teacher to care about care about her students and the next steps that they could take for children. So that is my first objective, and the rest are on this tab again. And then I end with my teacher philosophy as my conclusion. So thank you so much for listening.